What's up? Welcome to creating more rotational capacity in your core. This is going to be part one of a three-part series, and we're going to start on the ground, work our way to kneeling, and then standing, and show you how I think about rotational capacity with the core translating to the golf swing. And so on top of that though, whatever we do here in the trunk, if we're trying to create more rotational strength, control, and capacity with the obliques, this hip might be missing some type of rotation internal. If the glute med isn't necessarily stabilizing and external and assisting with some internal rotation, what I do in the core isn't necessarily going to translate as well as I would like it to the golf swing. So be sure to check out that once we release that series on the hips. And also, two things, I have a strength standard test link for you in the description. This is just going to help you identify where you are at in the strength, stability, power, control spectrum. Meaning, are you somebody who maybe needs to work on a little bit more strength to work your way up to doing some more explosive work? Are you somebody who has adequate strength and you need to maybe work on some mobility, rotational capacity, and control? So it's going to help you identify that. And then lastly, if you just want to get to a consistent routine plan of having workouts laid out for you to optimize for golf, I also have those coming available in the link below. Whenever you watch this, they might be available, they might not. So stay tuned, keep watching. All right, so first things first, try to keep it as short as I can on this first piece. So when we're working on the core, basically there's muscles that really control anti-rotation deeper in our core, transverse abdominis, multifidus, to name a few. They then create the stabilization, they set the foundation for the obliques to rotate on top of that. And so if those muscles are weak, they don't have good anti-rotation control, we are going to limit the obliques capacity to essentially create rotation around that corset of, if you will, of muscles. And on top of that, right, we are going to maybe do some med ball work and then again, not be able to get that to translate to the swing. And so we'll start on the ground, foundation, right? Some more simple movements. And the first thing for me, especially that I'm working on, is trying to break away from the pattern of kind of defaulting to this overextension, right? After years, so many years of snatching, deadlifting, right? My body tends to just get really pulled into extension in most patterns that I do. And I lose the kind of control capacity through my obliques by overextending, kind of disengages the obliques. So that first piece is just working on getting a little bit more trunk control, a little bit more asymmetry between anterior and posterior. So first thing I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna hop on here. This would be kind of like a warm up and get the knees 90 degrees. I'm gonna really feel like I almost tuck my tailbone a little bit and I pull my hamstrings down. And when I do that, you'll kind of see the small of my back get flat, right? And then for this, it's super easy, super simple. All I'm doing is I'm inhaling, and when I inhale, I wanna feel an expansion in my lower part of my thoracic spine, kind of expansion outwards and actually into the ground. So you actually feel some pressure in that lower part of your thoracic spine, maybe even working up higher as you keep going, right? I'm just trying to get away from all things that essentially brace like this, right? In that extension, right? And the diaphragm plays a big piece of that. And so when I'm here, again, tuck, feel like you kind of tuck your tailbone a little bit, pull the hamstrings down, you'll feel everything engage. And now as I breathe in, I expand, pushing outwards. And then as I inhale, I want to feel like my diaphragm is actually pulling up into my rib cage like a cone, right? So the diaphragm pulls up and then expands down. But a lot of us kind of get stuck in this over exhalated extension position. And so here again, just inhale. And then as I exhale, last piece, I'm just gonna push my shoulder blades forward while keeping my head flat on the ground. And just adding in that serratus anterior is going to help, again, just teach the body how to create a better rib position for the obliques to work on, because they essentially kind of, the force translates into our serratus and into the obliques here. And if I'm in this position, they kind of have to turn off again to be there. So I want to kind of set up a better piston, if you will, for them to rotate around. Think of like in a car, right? The belt, right? And you have, the cylinders that they're rotating around. And this is us trying to get those cylinders just to be in a good position so the belt can do its work. So for here, I'm just going to do about 20 breaths to just kind of warm up, set the foundation. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on two things at once. So first one is the iliacus. So when I'm in, let me show you in the swing first. So when the hip, if I'm going in the swing, daughter's handy dandy little lag club, but when I'm going into the swing and you create this internal rotation, the adductors and the iliacus need to be setting the pelvic bone, stabilizing it for, again, the obliques, the body, to recognize that we have the capacity to really rotate around that hip. And so if they're weak, if they don't stabilize it, they don't set the pelvic floor, again, we lose our strength control with larger ranges of motion. So first one, super simple. Again, you worked on getting that lower back flat, setting in a good position. I'm going to take one leg up, and while keeping the small of my back really flat, I'm just going to lower. I want to feel essentially kind of up on the inside of that hip bone, my iliacus engaging. So the iliacus facilitates hip flexion, so raising the hip, but it also helps assist in hip external rotation. But now the problem is we can get too dominant in our iliopsoas that also flexes the hip, and not really have that foundation, a little bit more stability from the iliacus. So if I'm here, I have to really keep this flat, and I really want to feel like this flexion comes right at that hip, and you should feel essentially something kind of pulling right on that inside of the hip bone. For this, I'm just going to do 2 sets of 10, just kind of get it active, just get yourself some better sense and proprioception of that, and just help potentially weed out any type of strength deficits you might have in the muscles that create that hip flexion. But again, it's setting into those adductors. So 2 sets, 10, 15, go till you kind of feel a burn. If you can't necessarily do it while keeping that knee straight, right? If you can't keep your lower back flat while doing it and your knee is straight, you can just bend and just kind of go down, tap, and then work your way to straight, tap all the way down. And then once you really get the knee straight, you actually be able to feel the difference in the transition between the iliopsoas and the iliacus. You'll kind of feel 2 separate compartments or muscles in there working on that flexion. All right, so that's setting the tone engagement for that. And then I'm gonna go, you can kind of go 2 routes. You don't have to get crazy like what's the perfect order. But next is the adductors. So just getting them, so they adduct, bring the hip in, but they also just sit and stabilize in opposition to like our glute medius, more of the hip abductors. And so often, a lot of us, we get pretty weak in that groin area, right? We stop cutting a lot, doing a lot of, cutting exercises, sports, so on and so forth. And, we sit at the desk all the time, whatever. So we just need to be able to reteach them how to stabilize. There's a couple different movements you can do for this. Even kettlebell swings help with this. You can do single leg RDLs. But for now, if you're just really starting out and working on your rotational capacity, I want to actually isolate just the adductors to start and get you to feel that proprioception. If I do single leg deadlifts, right, you might be maybe a little bit more abductor heavy. So we're actually, this one is just, instead of really having both work at the same time, we're working on the adductors. So let me get into it before I get too wordsy, but just here, just straight up. And now, right, I'm feeling that engagement essentially kind of intertwining up into that iliacus that we just worked on. Go up, hold it for 10, 15 seconds, right? Again, same thing. And then back down. You can just do 2 each side. Do it for 3 sets. Hold it for 15 seconds. Just work on feeling that inner thigh into that iliacus that we talked about engaging, right? And so for some of you, that might be really hard. Might feel like they're pulling a lot. Really use that knee on the ground to add in more assistance. And then work your way up, right? For me, I've been working on this the past few weeks. At first, just because I've really neglected adductors, it was pretty weak. Now it's getting a lot easier, right? So now let's work on those deep spinal stabilizers that prevent, they create anti-rotation. So it's stabilizing the lumbar spine as your obliques rotate around the spinal column. So a dead bug variation here, right? Put a ball, something like this, in between. So now we're gonna essentially do that iliacus with stabilizing anti-rotation. So I go opposite arm, opposite leg, and I press. And so when I press, I actually want to feel that iliacus engage again. I should feel those ribs down and feel this kind of cross-sectional pattern engaging while keeping that lumbar flat and stable, right? So again, what's happening here is we're creating some oblique engagement, but we're using the floor to really assist in preventing that lumbar spine from getting rotation. So it's activating that transverse, the multifidus, while also getting the obliques to start creating some engagement in there. So really kind of feel that flexion, feel that in that inner hip, lower spine flat. And again, you can be a little bit more legs like this, but just make sure you're creating that cross-sectional press into each other. And now, between those 4 things, I think that's everything I wanted to do to start. But that's essentially our groundwork. Again, setting the trunk, setting the ribs in a position, getting the lumbar deep stabilizers activated. So just setting everything up to then really let my body feel free and secure that I can rotate around and not dump excess torque and rotation into the lumbar. And then again, I'm setting the foundation of the things that have to stabilize the pelvic bone as my body turns and rotates, right? And if I don't have that, I'm gonna kind of essentially be blocked here, right? And so I could work on the trunk, right? But I'm always going to be limited if I don't have that foundation to create more rotation. So part 1, be sure to watch part 2. We go up to kneeling, get a little bit more advanced, do some band rotational things that everyone loves, things that's gonna make you a super fast golf swinger. So let's get into it.